ParentalRights.us.
Talk radio leader 760 KFMB presents It's Your Money and Your Life. For the next hour, Richard Musio and Joe Vecchio will educate and inform you on matters related to your financial future, your life, and your leisure. Now, with It's Your Money and Your Life, here are Richard and Joe.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Joe Vecchio, your co-host, announcer, and producer, coming to you live from KFMB with 50,000 watts of power. We're heard not just in San Diego County, but Orange County, LA County, up the coast of Seattle on a good night, down to Cabo, out to the desert. You can hear us on the 760 KFMB app or 760KFMB.com. And now it's time to introduce the main man of the hour. He's a best-selling author. He is a marathon runner. He is a family office advisor to several high-net-worth families. He's a philanthropist. He's an all-around good guy and family man. And his name is Richard Musio. Richard, how are you tonight?
I'm marvelous, Joe. I'm all tennised out.
You've been lounging around, and I've been doing all the research. So.
Exactly. I was down in Indian Wells. I want to thank our sponsor, UBS, because they let us use the UBS suite down at Indian Wells yesterday.
Oh, you've been slumming
Got some amazing matches in, and then, of course, it was a different dinner menu than it was lunch menu even, so you talk about being spoiled. So thanks to Ty Lim, Patrick Schurtenberger, Mike Kaniger, who, of course, works with Mike Carrancha and Drew Freitas. Also wanted to give a big shout-out and congratulations to Mike Kaniger, partner of Drew Freitas and Mike Carrancha, because he ran his first ever marathon last Sunday. He ran the LA Marathon and finished in just over 5 hours in that brutal heat. So congratulations, Mike.
Wow. Kudos
to you. That's quite an accomplishment, because it was about 15 degrees hotter than anybody in their right mind would have wanted it to be to run a marathon last Sunday.
Well, I haven't been getting into running yet, Rich. I promised to do that, but I did go gluten-free and sugar-free, and I noticed a big difference in just like 7-10 days.
That's good, Joe. I'm actually gluten-free intolerant.
Yeah, really?
That's a joke.
Oh, gluten-free intolerant. Well, you've never touched a cigarette or had a
no, I don't. I've never even
so.
tasted coffee in my lifetime. So I'm not too bad.
But anyway, have you eat bread and pasta and all that though?
I'm Italian.
Yeah, I know.
That's a rhetorical question.
I am too, but I tell you, I feel so much better that
Joe, I can't speak unless I have a piece of bread in my left hand.
And of course, if they tie our hands together, we can't talk either.
Exactly.
So. But anyway, we've got to
we got to get going, Joe, because we got a lot of people in studio.
We do. But I just want to plug the USO is going to have their 73rd anniversary Stars and Stripes Ball. I promised Marina Horowitz I do this. It's May 3rd. If you want to support the military heroes, look them up online there. But the Stars and Stripes Ball for the USO. But anyway, tonight in studio, quite a distinguished gentleman. He's an MD, PhD, and he's a filmmaker and is a man of many talents. Graduate of Harvard, MIT, and Harvard Med School. We'll get into all that in a second, though. But his name is, and he's director of a movie called Divorce Corp, and that'll be the bulk of the conversation tonight. But his name is Joe Sorge. And Joe, good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, gentlemen?
Wonderful.
Doing great, thanks.
So, look, I've seen this movie 2 times. It actually was in the theaters in San Diego here. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, Joe, your educational background, and how you got into filmmaking, and then why you got into this film.
Well, I started out in medicine. I never really practiced medicine, but I went to medical school, and then I started a biotechnology company. And then after 25 years of doing that, I wanted a change of life, and so I sold the company. And
well, not just any medical school. I mean, you went. Let's say where you went to school, because you MIT and Harvard, right?
Yeah, a lot of time in Boston.
Okay, there you go.
It was it was hard work, challenging schools.
You might be humble, but I'm not, so I'll brag for you. But anyway. 3 degrees, this gentleman. But anyway, then you got into the biotech sphere here and ran a company for many, many years in San Diego, right?
Yeah, in 1984, we started a biotechnology company. My brother, my father, and myself. It was called Strategene, and we sold it in 2007. Okay. And since then, I've been pursuing some other interests. We have a TV show called The 6 Little McGees, and created this documentary called Divorce Corp.
Right. Now, what was the motivation and genesis for the idea to do this film? Did you have a bad experience, apparently?
Well, unfortunately, I went through the family court system here in San Diego, and I don't want to particularly talk about my case or any of the specifics of that, but I saw so many people that were, I thought, treated poorly by the court system. You know, when you go to public court, you sit in the courtroom and you wait for your case to be called, and there may be 10, 15 other cases that go before you. And I just saw people being abused. I saw relationships between the lawyers and the judge that I thought were somewhat questionable. Some of the body language, some of occasionally the judge would ask the lawyer for advice. It almost seemed like the lawyers knew more than the judge. And so, it just made me think that there might be substance for a documentary there. And so we began to do some research. And once we investigated other stories around the country, we were shocked at some of the stories that we learned about.
Yeah. The film Divorce Corp, it was in theaters here in about 40, how many around the country you said?
About 35 theaters around the country.
Right, which is great for a documentary if people know how. And you spent, this is a pretty high budget film. Most of them are $500,000, where the budget for this was a couple million, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, that was, to give you an idea, the Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth was 1.8. So, spent more than that, and he got an Oscar. So, maybe we'll put yours up for an Oscar too. Who knows? But I've seen the film 2 times. You start out at the beginning saying it's a $50 billion a year industry. It's real easy to get married, and it can be very difficult and long time to get a divorce, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And I don't believe that is a government policy. If the government wanted to make it difficult to get divorced, they could impose a tax and have that money go to the public treasury. But instead, the money goes to private wealthy individuals, the lawyers and the judges and the custody evaluators and the accountants that are involved in this business.
Yeah, I was amazed to see how the judges, they'll force one of the parties to sell their house so they could pay off the lawyers, right? I mean, isn't that what's going on?
It's incredible. The family court judges are all powerful. And it's because the judiciary has unilaterally called the family courts courts of equity. And because they label them courts of equity, they're able to squirm out from under some of the constitutional protections that we would have in another kind of court, either a civil court of law or a criminal court. And so you're not entitled to a jury. You're not entitled to a lawyer if you can't afford one. You're not entitled to a speedy trial.
Well, what happens if you can't afford a lawyer? You have to represent yourself?
You fend for yourself.
Oh, my God.
But Joe, my question as a professional is I've never really begrudged professionals getting paid if they're offering value. But having represented a couple of clients as, shall we say, support in divorce, I'm not a divorce attorney. I'm actually a CPA who does forensic accounting. What's amazing to me about the court system is the time involved, which is also, I guess, a function of money. It gets much more expensive as time just drags and drags and drags. Can you comment on how slow the process is?
Well, a typical divorce takes 2 years. And, in Scandinavia, you fill out a form and you submit it to the government, and then you're divorced. No lawyers, no courts.
But when you say typical, you just mean of an average person.
Yeah, typical divorce 2 years. Some of them can go 10 years. We had one person, 22 years, and they were still battling.
Jesus.
But yeah, I don't hang around with average people. So the people I've represented who've been divorced, they tend to have net worths, in 8 figures and above. And I mean, they're pretty. In fact, you might have heard of some of them if I mentioned them.
But even those...
so those tend to even take longer than 2 years is my point.
But those prenups, sometimes those don't even hold water. If they're judges can still pierce those, right?
Yeah, they can pierce them.
Yeah.
And there are a number of factors that will determine whether a judge can pierce a prenup or not. But it's, Richard, it's very interesting that you say that these wealthy people, the divorces last longer, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think when there's a lot of money there, the cases get dragged on. And in fact, if you are broke, if you have no money at all, well, let's say you have the $500 it costs to pay the court fee, you'll sail right through the system. It's almost like you're a homeless person that gets ignored, But if you have money, then somehow they figure out that you need this expert and that expert, and your children need lawyers to represent them, and it turns into...
That came out in the documentary. That's the first thing the lawyers do is check on all the assets, and you have a form you go through, right? And they want to know your retirement funds, every darn thing. And if they smell there's money there, then right away they get the parties battling, it seems, right?
In part, it's that there's money to pay for the battle, and in part, sometimes one of the parties wants to fight over the money. Whenever there's money involved, you get strange behavior from people, and family court's no different. They say that criminal court is bad people on their best behavior, and family court is good people on their worst behavior.
But do you think fees should be capped, though? Because I know when people are billing by the hour, they can sort of perpetuate billing by large document requests and so
Actually, I do not. I believe in
okay.
free enterprise, and I believe that if a professional can charge a large hourly rate and they earn it, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. What I think we should do is take the money out of the divorce process. I don't think it should be an adversarial fight. a divorce court is like the Roman Colosseum with Caesar there, thumbs up or thumbs down, and people fight to the death. Not literally to the death, but sometimes they do. I don't think the dissolution of a marriage should be anything like that. I think it should be mediated in a quiet conference room. I think people should be encouraged to cooperate, to compromise. And again, part of the film, we studied how they do it in Scandinavia, and they do not go to court. They do not use the adversarial process. They simply sit down with their accountant, and the accountant says, okay, here are your joint assets. This is how it should be divided. And that's how it goes. Now, the Scandinavians have an advantage. They don't have alimony, and they don't have very high child support. Child support is a fixed amount for every child, and it's sufficient to take care of the needs of the child, but it's not supplemental pseudo-alimony like we have in the United States.
Yeah.
And so it makes it a lot easier to go your separate ways.
Yeah. We'll get more into this. Get over to divorcecorp.com, folks. We're going to take a little break right now. Come right back with more of It's Your Money and Your Life, the award-winning show right after. All right, we're back with our guest director, Joe Soares, director of Divorce Corp. You should get on that website.com and get the film and get the book and everything else. He's an expert on this. Joe, there was an outrageous case in Indiana in your film about a gentleman. You want to tell us about what happened to him?
Sure. Well, this gentleman, his wife filed for divorce, and for 2 years, they each took care of their 2 little girls, half and half. So they would spend half the time with the father, half the time with the mother. And then the judge ordered a custody evaluation be done on both parents, and the custody evaluator recommended a 30-70 sharing of the children rather than 50-50. And this gentleman challenged that, and he could not make any headway in the court, so he started a blog that criticized the custody evaluator. And the judge essentially told him, he said, look, I cannot stop you from blogging about the custody evaluator, but I can tell you this, it's probably going to affect the final outcome of your custody situation. Well, the gentleman felt that he had, First Amendment rights, the right of free speech, and so he didn't shut down his blog. And when the judge made a final custody determination, he gave 100% custody to the wife and 0% to this gentleman. And so the gentleman started blogging about the judge because he couldn't see his daughters
on his Facebook, right? Just for his own friends, right? I think. That's...
Yeah, that's another case.
Okay.
But that's okay. We can get into that one too. But this individual started saying that this judge was being terribly unfair to the children, and in fact said that he thought that the judge was guilty of child abuse for taking the children away from their father. Well, they then charged him with harassment of a judge, a criminal charge, convicted him and sent him off to prison for 5 years. Not because he didn't swear on his website. There were no threats. It was simply because he was criticizing the judge's actions. There was another case, as you alluded to, another gentleman on his Facebook site was not allowed to see his children because his wife had accused him of domestic violence. He was acquitted in criminal court, so he was found not guilty, yet the family court judge still would not let him see his children, but under supervised visitation situations. So he posted on his Facebook site that, the laws are essentially unfair. All you have to do is claim that you are afraid of someone, right, and they take your children away. The judge told him he was going to go to jail for 60 days unless he posted an apology to his wife on his Facebook site for 30 days. It's just unreal what
well,
some of these
another
cases.
point. One of the points in the film was, there are a few consequences for false accusations, and you had that one investigator. He's counseling parties how to get the house if they just make negative stuff up.
Yeah, well, this is a very sensitive area because, there are true accusations. And when true accusations are ignored by the judge, sometimes there are tragic consequences. If someone really is threatening a life or violence, that's something that has to be dealt with. But on the other hand, we talked to many, many attorneys and experts who said that it's also false accusations of domestic violence are used as a strategy to win the children and win the home. And if you get custody of the children and you get possession of the home, you end up financially much better off. And I think that's one of the terrible things about our system is that somehow the children are put into the middle of this financial tug of war. And the more time that you get with the children, the more child support you receive or the less child support you have to pay. And so they essentially put a price tag on the children's heads and use them to incite a battle between the parents.
So, Joe, question, speaking of children, it seems to be more and more popular for judges to recommend that children get their own legal representation. What do you think about that?
I think in most cases that's a scam. In some cases, it may be necessary, but unfortunately, what you see in our film is that the judges will appoint one of their friends, an attorney, to represent the children. In some cases, the attorneys will bill $100,000 to represent a 2-year-old child that he's not even talking to. He takes the kid to the movies or to buy some ice cream,
right? Bills
and
for
then bills $100,000 for that. And then that attorney can give campaign contributions to that judge. So there's a cycle there. I mean, it's a clear conflict of interest, but our laws do not prohibit that sort of behavior. And so you get this cycle where the judges hire experts or attorneys. The parents have to pay for those attorneys, and then those experts and attorneys give campaign contributions to the judges, hold fundraisers for them, hire them after retirement in their law firms. There's just an incestuous type of relationship.
What would be some good recommendations? Maybe require the couples to go to mediation first and try that before they go to court, and then maybe take courts of equity and put them under the Superior Court rubric. Would that help? Or?
Well, I'm a strong proponent of mediation. I think people should resolve things under peaceful settings. They should try to compromise. Court is a terrible place. Sometimes you think you're going to go in there and win something, and you end up losing all your money. You lose your children. You can go bankrupt. You lose your home. So it's very scary. But unfortunately, under our current system, there's a prize for the person who wins some of the time, and that tempts people, especially when there's some money in the partnership, where it tempts one of those parties to go in and litigate. And oftentimes the lawyers will encourage that. And so you find that people in the United States do not use mediation as much as they could. As I said earlier, in Scandinavia, couples talk things out. There's no financial incentive to go to court. And so they essentially mediate. It may be with a priest or an elder or someone that they trust, mutually trust, but they generally talk things through. Whereas in the United States, they go into this gladiator-type battle, and nobody wins except the professionals.
So, Joe, question, love being a nebulous thing, what attributes need to be in place so that people can stay married, in your opinion?
Well, I think, it's very interesting. People say, well, if divorce is so easy in Scandinavia, the divorce rate must be very high. But in fact,
it's low.
The divorce rate's lower.
Right.
It's lower than it is in the United States. Right. And I think what they do in Scandinavia is I think they take a little longer before they get married. They get married at an older age. So they've really determined that this is someone they want to spend their life with. And you reach a certain age and it's like, okay, divorce is not in the cards anymore. But I think in terms of maintaining a good relationship, well, that's I'm no expert on that. But I'd say good communication, respecting the other person, treating the other person as you would want them to treat you.
And then we mentioned at the break we're each having some individual hobbies and occupations, hobbies, and what was the third thing?
Friends.
Oh,
mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of times you lose a lot of those when you're going through divorce,
yeah.
Right?
Well, a lot of times you lose them going through marriage too.
Yeah.
And I think it's healthy for people to maintain their own friends.
Yes, have to have strong social support, social networks. So even for good mental health, whether you're single, married, or whatever. So make sure you do that. But let's see. So these experts in the movie, there's one scene where a judge in Texas was whipping his daughter. She set up a camera in her room. She was a handicapped kid, and
mm-hmm.
I guess he didn't want her to be on the computer. Actually whipping her with a belt, and that guy's off the bench now, thank God. But I hope the girl didn't get any more abuse. So
he's off the bench not because the ethics committee pulled him off the bench. They let him keep his job for 2.5 years after that video came out. He's off the bench now because the public finally elected someone else to fill that position. But, we didn't show that to disparage that judge. We showed that to demonstrate how one human being could be so different philosophically from yourself or your spouse or your children, and that one human being can make these major life-changing decisions about your money, your finances, your home, where your children go to school, who gets to see the children, whether you get to see your children or not. We just think it's just wrong for these courts of equity to have, judge, jury, and executioner all as one single human being.
Mm-hmm. So, Joe, one or two things that could really improve things in terms of changes to the system, in your opinion?
Well, I think that if we take the money, I believe in the Scandinavian model. Mm-hmm. I think we should take the money prize out of divorce. I think, assets should be divided up. Marital assets should be divided 50-50. separate property gets retained by the individual, just like we have community property in the United States. But I think if there's going to be any alimony or substantial child support above and beyond the needs of the child, those should be determined by private written agreement between the parties, either a prenuptial agreement or an antenuptial agreement, where the parties say, okay, someone is going to be the homemaker, someone's going to be the breadwinner. We're changing the model here. The homemaker's giving up a career, so there will be alimony after divorce. But I don't think it's the template anymore. 80% of U.S. families have two wage earners. And so to force an alimony trial on people in every single case is just inappropriate in the United States these days. So I think, take the money out of the splitting up, have it contractually agreed to ahead of time, and we won't get these acrimonious battles that we have.
Yeah. Anyway, we're coming up on our break here, Joe. But 3 years of your life to make this film. How long to write the book? You wrote the book.
Well, I had a very talented co-writer on the book, so that helped. But that was about 6 months, and it was during the editing process of the film.
But folks, get over to divorcecorp.com and learn more. Get the book, get the movie. It's really fascinating stuff. And Joe, thanks for being with us. We're going to take our break right now. Come right back with after news, sports, and weather right after this. Hang on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
ParentalRights.us.